if you have like 20% of the church that says yes to everything, 80% of the church, which are maybe the people who are default no people, and they need to be challenged to say yes. Often that's going to require the default yes people to sometimes say no so that there's a gap, and the pain of that gap is felt so that somebody will step up. So I think when you do that, it can feel like you're letting people down, but I think that we can trust God to truly work all things together for good.
Let's go!
You're listening to the Marked Podcast. This is a podcast for women who are marked by a love for God, His Word, and His people. Welcome back to Marked. We are so glad you're here for another conversation about what the Bible says. Today, we're talking about balance.
Yes, and we have the perfect guest for this, Saunders. Caroline is a writer, Bible teacher, pastor's wife, and mom of three who believes in taking Jesus seriously and being unserious about nearly everything else.
That is so true. She's so funny.
She's so fun.
It's one of my favorite things about her.
Yes.
Is she's so easy to talk to.
Yes.
I love her. You know, I think there might be women tuning into this episode on balance. Maybe you saw the title and you thought, oh man, I really need some balance in my life, because you err on the side of being too busy.
Yes.
And I think that's just generally true of women. I think we do that. But I don't think it's true of all women who might be listening. I think there might be a struggle on the other side. Mm-hmm. Some of us are seeking comfort a little bit more than busyness. Mm-hmm. Or maybe looking for too much margin in our lives. I mean, we've all seen that meme of, I'm sorry, I can't come to work today because I've got to go to counseling and get my nails done and run by Starbucks. I might make it by 2:00, you know.
Yes.
And so that's a real thing. And I think it could be a generational issue. But those are things that we deal with. And so we're talking about creating balance in your life on that end as well. So I serve with young adults at my church. I lead a life group. And the thing that I'm always talking with them about, really that involves balance in their lives, is just stretching themselves a little bit further than they feel comfortable in ways like relationships. So maybe somebody's on your heart today that you need to text, but you feel uncomfortable. Just stretch yourself a little. Send them a text and say, hey, I was thinking about you. How you doing? Yeah. Check in on them. Maybe it's saying yes to something at church, a volunteer position or a leadership position that might need you to stretch yourself a little bit. Okay, what do you have to say about that, Andrea?
Well, I just think this is a wonderful conversation that is complex in many ways.
Complex,
there will be a lot of different applications that, people will have, but it also represents a beautiful invitation.
Yes.
An opportunity to take maybe a look at our life, to find where are the areas that we're imbalance, out of balance, and all of that is going to push us back to relationship.
Yeah,
and so
right.
I love that. I love that for some people, it will help them to slow down. For others, it may be that, motivation that we need to step out and to try some new things. And so it's a great conversation that is going to be very, individualized and personal for everybody who's listening.
I loved it, and it challenged me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. I was challenged for sure.
For sure. So one of the reasons I love Caroline so much is her humor, her relatability. I want you guys to know that Caroline has written Bible studies for teen girls, picture books for kids, retellings of Bible stories for elementary readers. She also helps lead a local women's retreat through her parachurch ministry, Story and Soul, where she gets to retell the big story of Scripture every year. Guys, she also has some incredible resources available from Lifeway Women. We have an upcoming study called The Names of God, which she contributed to. It's available now for pre-order. Yes. I'm very excited about studying the names of God. It's available in August, but you can pre-order it now. But also, she has done an awesome Bible study called Come Home on the theology of home. So if you are interested in that and want to hear more from Caroline, check it out.
Absolutely. Today we're talking with Caroline about what the Bible says about balance, what it means to live in rhythm with God's design instead of feeling stretched thin or pulled in a dozen directions.
We'll talk about how Jesus modeled balance, how to recognize when our lives are off kilter, and how saying no, even to good things, can actually help us flourish.
This one's full of wisdom, laughter, and so many practical takeaways. Let's get started.
Caroline, what does the Bible say about balance?
Well, balance is about proper proportions. And humans, I think, are notorious for wanting really large portions. We want to know everything. We want to have all the control. We want to maybe forget everything, do nothing, have no responsibilities. We just have a portion control problem. But what we see in the Bible is a limitless God who's placed limits upon humanity. So some of the places where we see that would be like Psalm 139, verse 5 and 6 say, you hem me in behind and before. And that word hem is a limiting word, that when David is saying this, he's saying, you have limited me. It says, you lay your hand upon me, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. So David's being limited in some way. He doesn't understand why. But one of the principles from Psalm 139 is that when your good, limitless God limits you, that is good. So those I think this kind of the limits that God puts in our lives helps us understand balance, because like Psalm 16:6 says, the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. That the limits that God has set in our lives are limits that we can live gladly within and not push past it. And I think that's what a life of balance looks like. But one interesting thing is that over the course of the big story, we are going to see God invite and empower people to do things beyond their limits. And then when they do, that points to Him. So biblically speaking, a balanced life is one in which we honor our God-given limitations, but at the same time, we honor our limitless God by obeying Him when He asks us to do things that push against our limits.
Wow.
Okay, that's so profound.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
I'm kind of blown away by that, because I never really thought about balance in connection with the idea that we are limited on purpose. And obviously that's one of the ways we are not like God. He is unlimited. We are limited. And He invites us into relationship. And as we're invited into relationship, the opportunities are incredible as we live hemmed into Him. So that's so beautiful, Caroline. All right, so if we're going to talk about balance, we have to get real and talk about imbalance, right? Because we've all been there. Share an example from your life, and we'll share as well. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I'll be very honest. Like, I feel like I'm in a situation right now, maybe over the past couple of months, I had felt this sort of growing overwhelm with our life and the responsibilities on my plate. And one of the things I feel like I've learned over the years is that overwhelm is not something I have to be ashamed of. It's really more God showing me that I have pushed past my limits, or that my season has changed and that changes my capacity. So it's not like my limits are fixed for all of time. It kind of shifts. And so, for example, right now, I've realized that I am living beyond my capacity when it comes to my relationships. So, like, one of the things that I commonly do is travel to go teach. And that has become overwhelming right now when it hasn't been in the past. And the reason is because I'm giving relational energy to women in other places in a season where my children are requiring more relational energy from me than ever. And our church is requiring a lot of relational energy, and none of that is bad, but I'm a limited person. So I've realized from my overwhelm that I am entering a season where I have to make my circle a little smaller in order to properly pour into my children, into my marriage, into our church, things like that. So I think overwhelm is really normal. And I think it's good to pay attention to it and to ask God to show you, okay, like, I don't have perfect knowledge of my limits, but clearly I'm past them. And can you help me? Can you give me wisdom to see what I need to do so that I can properly steward what you've put on my plate? I'd love to hear anything y'all have, any seasons y'all have had where you've
That's really good.
Imbalanced.
And honestly, we were actually having that same conversation before we jumped on about we're in a new season of life, both of us, and just learning to accept our limits in that and to set realistic expectations. And one area that I mentioned earlier that was my relationships, because I'm a very relational person. I
Yeah.
love my people, and I have a lot of people, and I'm blessed by that. I'm so thankful. But I have a new season of life, a new role with, Lifeway and travel and all of these new wonderful people that God has placed in my life. And so not only recognizing capacity, but also sustainable rhythms, I think has been something I've really tried to do. And in that process, I've had to grieve and let go of what was to embrace what is and what's to come. And so that has surprised me about this season of my life, because I wasn't expecting that. But it has been a good process of accepting this season and being fully present in it. And so that's just a real life example for me.
Yeah, and I'm struggling with the same thing right now. But I will tell you, when I think about the time that my life was the most imbalanced, it was probably about the same season of life you're in, Caroline, when my kids were younger. Because we got to a point in our family when we felt like our kids were completely taking over the family with all of their activities. I feel like every young mom can relate to this, because if you have multiple children, they have multiple activities. We had prioritized church and piano lessons. Those were our two things. And then, they all wanted to do maybe soccer or gymnastics or whatever. And times 3. I mean, guys, that completely took over my life. And we had to dial it back. We had to have a real come to Jesus moment in our family where my husband and I just said, we're going to do 2 things. Each kid can do 2 things. And we've pretty much already decided that church is one of them.
Yes.
And piano is the second one. And so we made a really hard choice. Now, there were seasons where somebody would say, can I play basketball? Stuff like that. That was very hard, because it did not – I'm also a pastor's wife, as you are, Caroline. And so, there's that. Maybe you don't have to be at everything at church, but it always weighs on you that you need to be supportive of what's going on, whether you're present and bodily there or whatever. And so there's just a lot pulling on us, especially in the season that you're in with young kids. And it took a real moment of us gathering and saying, what are our family values and priorities? And let's just nail it down.
Yeah. And one thing after you have that kind of meeting is to create rhythms, those sustainable rhythms. And that's something we did as a family. We recognized that with my ministry and with the kids and their sports, there would be seasons that were pretty intense. And we could weather those as long as there was a season of rest coming.
Yeah, I like that.
A season that we, maybe not completely unplugged, but definitely less than that rushed season or that busy season. And so rhythms were a big part of
I love that.
Yeah, I love that
of our,
too.
Recognizing balance and imbalance.
Yeah, that's totally true. So you took us to the Psalms to talk about balance, or, as we opened up the episode. Is there another place in Scripture, maybe a character we look at who can demonstrate balance for us well?
Yeah, so I'm sort of like not quite following the question, because I have 3 places, but they're connected. So the first thing is that we see in the very beginning, Genesis 1 and 2, that God begins things with a rhythm of work and rest. There's work and there's rest, and he models it perfectly. So he's the perfect example of this balance. But of course, that rhythm, that paradigm of work and rest was skewed by sin. So after the fall, work becomes frustrating. Rest becomes not that restful. And so, but we do get examples in Scripture of people who are walking in balance. And the first one that came to my mind was that story about Mary and Martha.
Yeah.
That Martha's doing all her things, and Mary's sitting at the feet of Jesus. And Martha's irritated, and we all understand Martha. We understand her. But Jesus says to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but one thing is necessary. And that phrase, one thing is necessary, I think is so formative, because it teaches us that worship is the main thing. And then life flows from that. So sometimes worship means work, but sometimes worship means resting. Mary was sitting at Jesus's feet. She wasn't walking around working as worship. She was sitting at Jesus' feet, but Jesus knew her heart is to worship him in that moment. But if we hold that story right next to the example of the Proverbs 31 woman, we see a poem where King Lemuel's mother is going through the alphabet and naming things that a woman who fears the Lord is doing. And it's not trying to give us a big to-do list or exhaust us, but she's showing these everyday things that a woman does, and she does them with worship. Because towards the end of that Proverbs, it says, a woman who fears the Lord will be praised. So she is worshiping through her work. And so I think that this good example of balance is a life that's centered on one thing, a life of worship. And sometimes that worship will mean that we work, and sometimes that worship will mean that we rest. And I think when we hold those pictures of Mary and Proverbs 31 woman together, I think it sort of can captivate our gospel imagination to help us imagine what our life might look like in proper balance as God has designed us to be.
That's so good.
That's so good. And I think that actually answers my next question, which is a life that is out of balance, does that mean that Jesus isn't first, that he isn't primary in our hearts and in our minds? And what I hear you saying is it means maybe there's a lack of worship.
Probably so. And I think that, I guess it depends on what you mean if you notice lack of balance. Because if you are overwhelmed, well, that would be a very normal human experience that I think is inescapable on this side of the fall. You're going to have moments of overwhelm. And part of that is because you do not perfectly know your capacity, and you do not perfectly know what your days hold. And when we think we can know those things, we're playing God. God is the only one who knows every day of our lives, who knows what's going on in our minds and our hearts and what we can handle. And so often we will end up in places beyond our capacity. So I think what's really key is not that we avoid those moments of feeling off balance, but that when we do feel off balance, we know where to go, right? Yes. We go to the one who knows everything. We cling to him. One of the things, and Angie, you're probably going to relate to this, but one of the things I've noticed in my family, actually, I think you both will, but we have realized as being a pastor's family that the church, and not intending to, but can take literally all of you. It can take all of your time, all of your energy. And nobody is wanting to do that, I don't think. But it's just one of those things that happens. And so we have had seasons where we realize, okay, our involvement with our local church, our ministry is outsized what we are able to give. And I think that's a normal thing. So my husband and I, our goal is not to avoid that feeling, but it's to pay attention to it, because that means you need to course correct. I think about growing up, my big thing that I did was ballet, and balance is an important part of ballet. And the way that you do it is not by falling over left and right and getting frustrated with yourself. It's these small moves of muscles to constantly course correct to keep you centered. And so I think when we're walking with the Lord and we see we're kind of shifting this way, okay, we're walking with the Lord, he helps us bring us back to center. And it's just that constant navigating of walking with him. So balance isn't something really to be achieved. It's like something to practice. And we practice it by walking with the Lord and knowing there are going to be times when we feel like we're going to topple over, but there is somebody there and we are not in control. He is in control. Praise God.
Yeah. I love that you said it's practice. And isn't that every day of life is really just practice? I mean, we're not ever really doing anything the way it's perfectly done. We're always just trying to practice it.
That's right.
And practice makes perfect, I guess.
And every day offers that reset too, which I think there's so much hope in that. Like when we find ourselves off balance or out of balance or imbalanced, it's like, okay, this is the day to reset. And just to continually go back to that thought of worship, what does it look like to walk with God in the midst of this moment, this season, this day, in an honoring and worshipful way?
Right. And I'm going back to, I kind of can't quit thinking about when you said sometimes work is worship. Sometimes that's part of it. I guess we always just have this idea that worship is just very, but sometimes work is worship. So I love that. So speaking of a great example, our greatest example, obviously, of balance is Jesus. So tell our listeners, how did Jesus model balance for us?
Well, one thing that I think is so beautiful about Jesus is he was very aware of his humanity, maybe in a way that many of us are not.
Interesting.
We will sometimes have needs and act like we don't. But Jesus, when he was hungry, he was hungry. When he was tired, he was tired. When he needed time alone, he took time alone. I really think that's very beautiful. And if Jesus is going to live this fully embodied life and aware of his human limits, who are we to act like we do not have these same God-designed needs? At the same time, there were definitely moments when his humanity was pushed to its limits, when he was tired but still taught, when he was hungry but he endured, when he was anxious and said, anxious before the cross, and anxiety, it feels that's not even the right word. Like I need a much bigger word. But when he said in that moment, yet not my will, but yours be done, he pushes past his human limits according to the Father's will and lives within his limits according to the Father's will. So I feel like that's that example for us, that we live within our limits. And yet, of course, we don't want to become people that say no to the Lord because, I'm too tired to do that. I don't have time for that. There are going to be things that God asks you to do and you're going to feel like you don't have it. And of course, that's where, I think of 2 Corinthians 12, 9 and 10. And Paul says, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is perfected in weakness. And so it's almost beautiful to be asked to do something beyond your limits, because then you just know God did it. I always say there's like this cycle that I feel like happens, that we do all we can do, and then we kind of get undone, and then God does it. And then we know, because we got undone, we know that only he did it, So it's very beautiful to live this like balanced life, because you're going to be able to look up and be like, by the grace of God, that happened.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to boast in my weakness, because that's crazy that worked out.
I was just sharing that thought with a group of students at Ouachita Baptist University, 1,400 students. I had the chance to speak at chapel there. And I was talking about how our weakness is a platform for God's strength, and I actually referenced that verse. And I shared about my journey with dyslexia. And it was just a poignant moment to give glory to God that, he makes us able. And what was so cool out of that experience was there was one young woman who is a worship arts major, feels called to, be involved in worship ministry, and she struggles with dyslexia. And no one has ever talked to her about it in that way.
Wow.
She said, I've never heard anybody talk about dyslexia in a spiritual context. And I just love that, how the Lord redeems and how really that draws us into relationship with him and really, really helps us to rely on his strength and his power. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think we are always trying to think about leaning into our strengths, leaning into our gifts, and we're thankful that we can do that. But knowing those areas of weakness or opportunities for God to show up and do what only he can do, that's beautiful. So beautiful.
It is. So I really want to ask you, Caroline, about really the happy middle between, well, let me say it this way. My generation, Gen X, our generation, we have maybe a skewed, I'm just going to say it, idea and concept of work life and what it should be like. We're the ones who don't take all our PTO. We save it up. We've got sick days for 20 years. We just don't take them. We work, right? And then some of the younger generations tend to have a better idea of, I've got PTO, I'm taking my PTO. Like, that's what it's for, right? But also, I think we can look down on each other for being that way. You know what I mean? I will even tell you, there's been such a heavy emphasis on self-care. And we even did an episode last season with Tara Dew on soul care. And so I feel pulled in a lot of ways. I'm just going to tell you, like, I've got to complete these tasks. I've got to get this done. I've got to work hard. I've got to burn the candle at both ends. But also I need to rest. I need to rest. I need to take the weekend off.
Take a personal day.
Take a personal day. Yeah, these kinds of things. It's just really hard to find the balance of that. So what would you say to someone maybe even who is struggling with working hard? I want to talk about that because I think there are people who we understand we shouldn't be working as hard as we are. But sometimes we don't work as hard as we should. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I definitely know what you're saying.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah, we all know people who are working hard and need to rest. And we're like, oh my goodness, please take a nap. But we also know people that you're like, okay, that's enough napping for you. Like, time to like get up. And it's very foggy. It's hard to figure out like what are the lines. You sort of can sense when they're crossed, but like what are they? And with so many things, like I think we long for legalism. We long for something really clear and straightforward. We want like a recipe. But I tend to believe that we're not going to find that through recipe. We have to find it through relationship. And so if we take that like Romans 8 idea of walking by the Spirit versus walking by the flesh, I think that's sort of the leading idea because our flesh wants to hustle, wants to please people, wants to feel productive. Sometimes the flesh wants to lay around and do nothing and have no responsibilities.
Right.
But the Spirit invites us to rest in the Lord by living within our God-given limits and invites us to rest in the Lord by clinging to Him, resting in His Word, doing what He asks, even if it feels beyond what we can do. So I think it just continues to go back to that idea of worship. You really don't have to figure it out on your own. But if you're walking by the Spirit and you get that sense of like, oh my goodness, I have just signed up to lead 47 Bible studies. And on paper, that does sound very spiritual. But is there a chance that I'm actually not walking by the Spirit, but walking by the flesh for doing all these things? And I think that if we're constantly bringing these things before the Lord, He's going to expose those things. He's going to show us He cares. And He has given you everything you need in order to live a godly life. But sometimes we're like reaching beyond.
Yes.
Or sometimes we're doing nothing. And so I think He's really the only one that we can trust to guide us in what that looks like.
The beautiful thing about that is I think it does start with knowing which one you're more prone to. Am I more prone to work too hard, or am I more prone to, opt out?
Look for
Are you a default yes?
Yeah.
Or a default no person? Yeah.
I know. And so like starting and like knowing it and admitting it. And honestly, our society values the hard worker. And so that almost feels good to say, I'm the person who overworks. But it's really prideful. And it's just as wrong as being lazy. It's just as wrong. And so like acknowledging which one you default to and then bringing it before the Lord. I love that. That's such a great way to bring it under a spiritual umbrella. Like you were saying, dyslexia, bringing that under a spiritual umbrella. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good, really good. And, for those of us who default yes, right?
Yeah, default to yes.
We are the hard workers. We're the pleasers. We're the, from sun up to sundown.
Yep.
We are going to have to learn, and I'm saying we for me, how to say no and do that in a way that's honoring to the Lord and in obedience to our calling. So you mentioned the 47 Bible studies. I may or may not have found myself in that situation at different times. So let's talk about saying yes to the Lord and in that process, saying no to others. How do we do it? How do we do it well?
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I have a practice of doing is when I ask people to do stuff, I usually say, hey, I want you to know I welcome a healthy no. I welcome a healthy no. So I think that can be something that we do for one another.
Ooh, I love
because
that.
Because it's not just like I want your wholehearted yes or I want your healthy no. And if there's just danger in offering like an unexamined yes. And I think if we can talk that way to one another, we build communities where the norm is to really discern these things and really think it through. and not just think just because something looks spiritual, it's therefore spiritual and the right thing for me to do. But sometimes it also helps to just have wording of how to say no, because I'm telling y'all, and it sounds like y'all are similar to me, I struggle with this so much. It takes so much energy for me to say no, to have the courage and the clarity to say no, that sometimes I'm like, ugh, I don't want to do that. I'll just say yes. But we have got to become better at doing that. So I think it's good to say things like, okay, thank you for asking me. I prayed about it, and I've realized I'm not going to be able to faithfully steward what God's put on my plate if I add this to it.
Yes.
That's a
However,
really good
I'm praying that God will provide the person you need to fill this gap. And what I think is beautiful about that is if you have like 20% of the church that says yes to everything, 80% of the church, which are maybe the people who are default no people, and they need to be challenged to say yes. Often that's going to require the default yes people to sometimes say no, so that there's a gap, and the pain of that gap is felt so that somebody will step up. So I think when you do that, it can feel like you're letting people down. But I think that we can trust God to truly work all things together for good, and to make your no a really beautiful opportunity for somebody else, for maybe other parts of the body that are under functioning, to rise up and to step up. And the other thing is it's good for us, because if we get that feeling that we've let people down, well, that's good for you, because it's exposing an idol. You really care about what other people think. And we really want to be the person where everyone knows you can rely on us, and things fall apart if we're not involved, and we want to be the go-to gal. It is good for that idol to be exposed. Now, it's not fun. I literally hate it, but I think it's really good for me, because if I keep feeding that idol, I'm not going to be able to serve the Lord well.
Yeah.
And in fact, I wouldn't be serving the Lord even by doing those spiritual things, right? I would be like serving myself, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right.
I love that you just said not serving the Lord well, because I was thinking as you were talking about some things that I have said yes to, and I was just having a conversation with a really good friend the other day, and she was saying, I can see a gap here. This was something going on at our church. She said, I could see a gap here. She said, I think I might reach out and volunteer to help with that. And I said, I think that's awesome, because if I do it, I am so stretched in my volunteering right now, I will become bitter. Mm-hmm. And bitterness is a sign for me that I'm living in imbalance, especially with volunteering at church. One sign for me is that I start canceling things. Do y'all do this? Like you plan a lunch with someone, or you say yes to attending a Bible study, and then when the time comes, you're like, you know what? I've got to reschedule this. I'm too busy. That's number one for me. Number two, though, is that bitterness and almost like I feel taken advantage of kind of feeling with the volunteering. Mm-hmm. And I know when I have reached my limit. Do you guys have signs like that? Like your warning flags go up when you start to experience something that tells you that you're imbalanced? You're laughing already, Caroline. What is it?
Well, a story came to mind because I got it. I've shared this somewhere and I don't remember where, but it was such a alarm for me. A friend texted being like, "Hey, I'm going through something. Can you pray for me?" And my reaction was, ugh. I was like rolling my eyes. I was like, "Oh, great. More people need prayer. Oh, great. Like more people need," you know what I mean? And I was like, "Caroline, are you okay?" And the answer was no, I was not okay, because of course you should text me and ask for that. But clearly I had overextended myself, and it was producing a lot of bitterness. And I'm the same as you. Like, it'll be bitterness towards my church because I feel like y'all are taking everything rather than me feeling like I'm gladly offering it. People are taking all my stuff. And so I get real yucky. I mean, but so when I have crazy reactions like that, I'm like, okay, it's time to reflect. Like, let's get right. This is not good.
That's good. What about you?
Yes, we were just talking about this in a leadership meeting, so this is top of mind for me right now. And I had to confess that when I am out of balance and I'm saying yes to everyone, what happens is my schedule gets so packed that the things that I'm actually responsible for get pushed to the wayside. Mm-hmm. And so it's this realization that I've overextended myself. And because of that, I'm not even doing what I'm required or supposed to be doing, doing it well. And so I'm actually doing everything pretty poorly. Yes. And so it's that realization. So when I am working at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night on my main responsibilities, we got a problem.
That's a problem.
Yeah. And so, and sometimes that happens. And sometimes, you know what? There are things that happen and you have to take care of it at night because of timelines. But I watch the rhythm of it. And so that has been my sign. Whenever I'm doing the main things at off times, then I'm like, okay, let's reset.
And I think one of the beautiful things about getting older is that you begin to recognize these things in your life. Like when I was 35, I would have just pushed through. Like this is just what it is. But now I'm more boundaried in that I know I cannot live my life this way because I'm not happy. Like I'm just not happy. So I cannot be working at 11 o'clock at night.
Right. And a funny story to go along with that literally happened 2 weeks ago. We had some friends who invited us to dinner and it was like a last minute invite. So Saturday, can you go out to dinner tonight? And I was almost like overwhelmed by that. Like, you want me to get out of the house tonight.
Right.
Like, okay, let me think about it. And then it was like the 40 questions, well, where are we going and how long will we be there? And is there a reservation? And I thought, who am I?
Yeah.
And so I just thought, well, I'm going to live crazy and we're going to say yes.
Good for you.
We're just going to say yes.
Yay.
So we went, had the best time with a group of friends.
Great.
And I came home and I told my husband, I was like, that was good for me. That's the old Andrea. Yeah. And I have to work on that.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
It was a funny response that caught my attention.
Well, we are winding up. We've already gone over our time, but I could talk to you all day, of course. But I would love for us to leave our listeners with just a practical tip that we all have for building more balance into our life, living a less imbalanced life. Why don't you start, Andrea?
Well, funny enough, mine's going to be margin.
Yeah.
And something I'm always working on is to create space for God to work and move, create space for those rhythms of rest and work. And then also just really thinking about what is sustainable. If I say yes to this, is it going to lead to that bitterness? Is it going to lead to that feeling overwhelmed? And if so, then I need to think about that healthy no.
I think that's so good. One of my favorite worship songs right now is Make Room. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to. And that doesn't just happen. Like we literally have to build in margin and space for God to move in our lives. And I love this, Andrea, you live this so well because one day you texted me, I'm working from bed today.
Yes.
And so the next Friday, I worked from bed and I actually sent you a photo. I was like, I'm working from bed today.
Yes. I was like, I'm not getting out.
I loved it. I was like, that is such a great idea. So good. So for me, it's giving myself grace. And I was telling Andrea right before we hit record that I've been so busy this week that some people jumped in and covered something for me. And part of me was so relieved and thankful. But then there's that other part of me that felt guilty that somebody had to take up slack for me. And she just looked at me and she said, that's grace. That's grace. And I was like, you know what? That is grace. And I need to accept it and be okay with it. And so I think that's mine. What about you, Caroline?
Well, what came to my mind was 1 Thessalonians 5:17, which says, pray without ceasing. And I think that if we want to walk by the Spirit, we want to have a life that's centered on worship, that sometimes means we're working, and sometimes means we're resting. It means like turning our ongoing mental monologue maybe, into a dialogue. It means offering those thoughts up to the Lord in prayer, that just leaving your mind and heart open, making it more of a conversation so that you can lead a Spirit-led life where you are examining things. You're not just agreeing to things without processing it. You're not just saying, oh, I have to do this, but you're praying, God, do I have to do this? You're able to prioritize unseen things rather than seen things, just those constant little micro corrections that can happen when the Holy Spirit has a say constantly in every moment of your life. So I think that can sound like crazy. I always have heard that verse and was like, pray without ceasing. Like, what could that possibly mean? But you're thinking all the time anyway, and God already knows what you think. So it's just like directing it to the Lord. And I think that the Spirit leads us in those moments. And for me, that has made such a huge difference, so that when things feel really unbalanced, I don't have to despair. Instead, I say, God, what can you teach me here? Lead me in the way everlasting.
Let's go!
Marked is a production of Lifeway Podcasts, executive produced by Angie Elkins, produced by Aaron Franklin, and engineered by Donnie Gordon. It's recorded in the Lifeway Podcast Studio in Brentwood, Tennessee, and edited by Caleb Hupengardner, with art by Lauren Irvin and music by Raven McKelvey and Robert Elkins.
And we're your hosts,
Angie Elkins
and Andrea Lennon. Meet us back here next week. If you want to join in the conversation, you can find us on social media at Lifeway Women. Today's show notes will be posted at lifewaywomen.com/marked. If you enjoy the show, leave us a review.
We're diving in to Marked. Let's go! Life on the go, and we're ready to grow. Get up, get out, get on the way. Can't wait to hear what they're gonna say. Hope for everyone. Ministry to motherhood. Come as you are, engage your heart. We know just where to start. We're marked by grace and by mercy. We're marked with hope for eternity. Ready for some weekly encouragement. Turn it on and up and I'm going in. We're marked by peace and by unity. We're marked and made for community. Go on